Hello everybody, Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Monday's edition, and we're broadcasting from our studios here in Irvine, California. Happy to have you with us today. And folks, we had some really good polling numbers come out over the weekend. And for all of you who enjoyed your college and pro football fix, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But let me get into some of this polling information for you. And folks, what I'm going to go over with you here, it's consistent with what we've been saying for the last month. But what's really interesting about this, we're going to go beyond Rasmussen and Trafalgar, some of the polling groups we normally rely upon, because what's happening here is all the mainstream media polling outfits, and we're going to get into those, are starting to see the handwriting on the wall that these Democratic policies over the past 2 years are abject failures. And there is no confidence in President Biden to lead the country, and we'll get into that too. So let's start off with it. A generic ballot. Now, we've talked about this ad nauseum really for the last 4 or 5 months. What is a generic ballot? Well, it's basically a simple question where you ask a voter, given the choice of a Republican or a Democrat, there is no independence in this, what would you choose? It's like a yes or a no, 1 or 2, black or white, red, blue, you name it. And in the generic ballot, Rasmussen's poll, Rasmussen has called the last 6, 7 elections within a point. The last time Rasmussen had the generic ballot, Republicans were +4. Now it's 48-41 +7. Folks, to translate that, normally if a generic ballot shows Republicans breaking even to even -1 with a Democrat, because they typically overpoll Democrats a little bit, that spells very, very good news for Republicans. But when you're sitting here at +7, and again, if it was anyone but Rasmussen, I have a hard time believing it. That spells blowout, folks. That's red wave territory if you're up by 7. But now let's sort of bring our enthusiasm back to earth and let's take it down just a notch. CBS, again, the mainstream media, they've got Republicans at +2. Now that's a little more like it, but likely CBS probably overpolled a little bit on Democrats. But here's what I really think is significant in these CBS numbers. When you're doing the generic ballot, you're really not focusing on individual races. It's sort of a collective across the country. Well, as you and I know, and we've talked about this, there's certain areas that are deep red and certain areas that are deep blue. Well, some of the deep blue areas are like really blue. However, CBS took it a step further. And if you strip out heavily red and heavily blue districts and focus only on competitive districts, those are ones that are within the margin of error, could go either way. Republicans have a lead 48-43. That's big news, folks. I mean, that's where you got to sort of cut through the numbers and explain to people what this means. That's very good news for Republican candidates. Now, let me give you a few more. Harris poll, okay. That's a good polling organization. They got Republicans right now +6. Let's go to a reliable pollster who we've trusted for years, and that's Robert Cahaly at the Trafalgar Group. He's got Republicans right now at +5. So you're sort of getting the message here. Trafalgar +5, Harris poll +6, CBS +2, competitive races +5. Now here's the real kicker, the surprising one, and folks, when the New York Times comes out and says Republicans are +4, someone at that editorial desk has to be pulling their hair out because the New York Times can't stand Republicans. It's about as anti-Republican paper as there can be. Why? It's in New York City, traditional heavily Democratic area. But even the New York Times, joining their mainstream media partner CBS, is calling it right now +4. Folks, if it comes out +4, I've said on the show numerous times, I thought we'd be in a +20 situation in the House of Representatives. I got news for you. If these polling numbers are right, and again, it's a poll. Who actually gets out to vote is a bigger deal. But if these polling numbers are right, that +20 is going to be more along the lines of 25, maybe 30. Now you start creeping into just a Republican victory, and you're not in wave territory, but meaning cresting wave, but you're getting close. Let's look at some other mainstream media outlets. CNN, not exactly a conservative bastion in the media. CBS poll, who do you trust to get the country moving in the right direction? Republicans, 54-45. That's a 9-point differential. Now, why is that? Well, people are not happy with the direction of the country. We've talked about this ad nauseum. 59% say the economy is extremely important to them. My question is, who's the other 41 that don't say it is? Inflation, extremely important, 56%. And there's another factor in here, folks. Extremely motivated voters, Republicans or Democrats? Republicans lead that 52-46. Now that's a pretty easy one to explain. Why are Republicans extremely motivated to vote? Because they're sick and tired of things like high inflation, high gasoline prices. By the way, gasoline prices are trending north. High food prices. They're tired of the woke educational system. They're tired of criminals being released early with no bail. They're tired of an open border policy with fentanyl just pouring into the country. They're tired of this transgenderism where a tiny, minute fraction of the population is trying to tell the other 99% of parents how to treat kids and do crazy stuff like change their gender. People are tired of that Democratic garbage. And the far radical left wing of the Democratic Party is pushing this crap. If you are trying to have your kids educated, do you want them educated on this woke garbage? No, of course not. You want to do what Glenn Youngkin did in Virginia. He won an election based on education reforms, and he's doing it. You don't want to hear these transgender nut jobs telling you what you have to do with your child on transgender surgery when he's a youth or she's a youth? Come on. That is insanity, lunatic, far left-wing fringe radicalism. People don't want to hear that garbage. They're tired of it. The Hispanic community turning on the Democrats because the Democratic Party doesn't share their values. Black Americans turning on the Democratic Party. Why? Because they want the same things any other ethnic group does. They want a good job environment to support their family. They don't want to be in a high crime area. They don't want the border wide open, and they want stable prices. Same thing everybody else wants. But in the past, Democrats have monolithically taken these groups as their constituents. Now, let's break it down even further. CBS News says Republicans are poised to increase turnout. Right now, again, the election isn't held today. People are starting to vote, though. There's been millions of votes cast. But CBS is saying Republicans are poised to increase turnout and take the House. The only hope that, according to CBS, Democrats have is if younger voters turn out. Their current projection is 224 to 211 Republican edge in the House. There's plus 13. That's slightly less than here we have it at Schaftlein report. We have it at plus 20. The Real Clear Politics average, and they're really, really good, is projecting a 26-seat pickup in the House. Now, if you stop right there and think about that, those are good numbers for Republicans. But if those generic ballot numbers are correct, then both CBS, Schaftlein report, Real Clear Politics, those are going to be conservative numbers. The RCP average of 26 might be pretty much in line. But if things, and look, can they get better for the Biden administration? Sure, they could. But 30 days, well, we're not 30 days out. This is October 17th. We're 3 weeks until Election Day. So these House races, again, unless you have massive youth turnout, we've never seen that. That's not to say it couldn't happen. But to have youth voters come out and dramatically vote Democrat when they see the same problems everybody else is, look, the Democrats tried to buy their votes with that phony, debt cancellation scheme Biden put together. Blatant effort to buy votes. That's all it was. So right now in the House of Representatives, things are looking good. But, each of these races are slivers of what's happening across the country. So, things can change. So the only way you can get out and assure these are correct is to make sure you do two things. A, vote. That's first and foremost most important. Whether you do it in person, by mail, whatever the preference is, just make sure you vote. And if you can, donate money to these Republican candidates. One thing the Democrats have done, they have swamped us in the money side of the game. And normally, whoever has the most money wins. It's not the case this year, though. A lot of Republicans are outperforming the money race because Democrats outraised them. Now let's look at some Senate races. And this is really interesting here. Fetterman is still up 2 in Pennsylvania over Oz. Where was that race a month ago? Fetterman was up 8 to 11 points. So that one's tight within the margin of error. And of course, the largest newspaper in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, endorsed Fetterman. You would expect it. How anyone could vote for this guy? I mean, I get some races how people could be motivated. Not this guy. I mean, we've talked about his health issues. We're not going to get into that now. But a guy that has the most radical positions, left of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, will harm Pennsylvanians by voting against every fracking measure to help out the United States on energy. This guy, he's not fit to serve. Do you really want a guy wearing a hoodie tattooed all up and down himself that can't speak representing you in the United States Senate? I wouldn't if I was a voter in Pennsylvania. But, that's why we have elections. Kelly's maintaining a pretty strong lead in Arizona, up 4. Warnock and Herschel Walker had a debate. A lot of people, including some of the more liberal members of the media, thought Herschel Walker outperformed in that debate. He acquitted himself quite well. Then they pulled a stunt with Warnock on the second debate, where they put an empty chair out there. For some reason, Walker didn't show up. I don't know why. Polling in Georgia, very tight. Warnock's +1 in most polls. J.D. Vance up 3.5 in Ohio. Senator Johnson +6 in Wisconsin. The Mandela Barnes strategy about spending every minute of every waking day talking about abortion does not seem to be working. Come on, Barnes, you can do better than that. I mean, I know you're a young guy. I know you're playing to the party politics. But again, try to at least talk about something else. That's why you're losing by 6. Adam Laxalt up 2 in Nevada. That's a potential pickup. So again, if these numbers play out as they are right now, you would lose 1 seat in Pennsylvania. You would pick up 1 seat in Nevada. But there's a lot of fluidity in these races. Herschel Walker down 1 point. Could he make that up over the next 3 weeks? Absolutely. In Colorado, Republican candidates only down 4 or 5 points. I can say the same thing about Florida. Rubio's only up 4 or 5 points, but I think Marco Rubio's going to win that race by anywhere from probably 2 to 5 points. Call it 3. But other races are tightening up too. Leora Levy, who was on our show up in Connecticut, running against Dick Blumenthal. That's a single-digit lead. Washington State, Patty Murray only leading by 3 points last poll I saw. So again, these Senate races are fluid. They could go either way. Real Clear Politics is projecting a 2-seat pickup for the Republicans. We're not at +2 here on Schaftlein Report. We're on +1, +1 or -1. You know, if election went today as the way we called it, would be 50-50. You know, there's a tight race in Utah. Mike Lee, solid, rock solid Republican, going against an independent candidate. Why is Mitt Romney pulling a stunt and not endorsing Mike Lee? It just shows to show you, folks. You know, Romney at one point was the nominee of the Republican Party, and now he can't even support a fellow Republican. You know what? That disgusts me. It really does. But Mike Lee's got to win the race on his own, and he's currently up 4 or 5 points. He's running against an independent who says he will not caucus with either Republicans or Democrats. I got news for you. He's going to have to pick one. Now, Nike founder Phil Knight, a billionaire who has supported traditionally Democratic candidates in the past, has said, I've had enough. I cannot take it anymore. And this is in the state of Oregon. And he's donating a lot of money to support the Republican candidate for governor in Oregon, Betsy Johnson. As he says, Oregon has gone the wrong way with the Democratic Party. It has so far left in Oregon, even Phil Knight, who is a benefactor of everything at the University of Oregon. I mean, they built a track stadium there, you know, put Phil Knight's track stadium, enhanced the football stadium. Phil Knight donated money. Phil Knight's been a benefactor to the state of Oregon. He's the founder of Nike. He's a multi-billionaire. And even Phil Knight, who's been an Oregonian his whole life, said, I can't take it anymore. Phil Knight's in his mid-80s, folks. You know, you always say, well, people above 70, they never can change. Guess what? Phil Knight is. He sees the Democratic insanity going on. Maybe there is hope in blue state Oregon if we can get a Republican elected governor. And you know what? If you can do it in Oregon, maybe Lee Zeldin in New York can defeat Kathy Hochul. That would be great for New Yorkers, because New Yorkers are being burdened with some of the most horrific government I've ever seen. Terrible. All right, now let's get into President Biden. Biden had an interesting week. He was out here in Orange County last week, did a fundraiser in LA, came here to Orange County, 5 minutes from our studio here. And he gave a speech at Irvine College, did some weird stuff. I'm not going to get it. Every time Biden gets around certain people, he just says weird stuff. I'm not going to dignify it by talking about it on the show. But Biden did say that the economy is strong as hell. And I'm saying, what? What's he talking about? Yes, certain parts of the economy are strong. You know, we've got unemployment, 3.5%, growing jobs, 260,000 a month. But prices are going up 8%. Food prices in the last year up 13%. Joe, come on. When you have almost 60% of the country worried about the economy and prices and inflation, come on, don't try to pull the wool over people's eyes. But that's a reason why only 26% of Americans, 26%, folks, that's a new low, want Biden to run for re-election. You know, I hate to say it, but he's earned that number. I mean, you know, he's our president. We want him to do well, but my goodness. Corrupt, clueless, dodges the press. I mean, it was really sad. I don't know if any of y'all watched the Philadelphia Eagle-Dallas Cowboy game last night, but Jill Biden, she was booed mercilessly. Now, look, we don't say anything about political wives. That to me crosses the line. So I frankly didn't like seeing that because I have nothing against Jill Biden. She's not running the country. Her husband Joe is. But boy, people were ticked off. And you know what? Boy, the booing. Now look, Philadelphia fans are pretty tough characters. When they had some bad years, I'm going back a long ways now, folks. They actually, Santa Claus showed up at the game and they booed Santa Claus. So Philadelphia Eagles fans can be pretty tough. But they defeated Dallas last night They're undefeated, and Jalen Hurts, the quarterback from originally Alabama and then Oklahoma, boy, he's got to be in the hunt for the MVP in the league right now. But Philadelphia fans are legendary. They booed mercilessly Jill Biden. Oh boy, tough on Jill. Okay, so now let's expand a little bit here. Okay, what are other things that are happening in the economy where Joe Biden, it's not really as good as it could be? Well, we've talked about inflation a lot. Here's something else that's really affecting younger people and why this, quote, push for younger people may not be so great. Inflation and higher mortgage rates are pushing away first-time home buyers. That's right. Prices are starting to fall in real estate for obvious reasons. We don't have free money anymore. You want to go out and borrow money to buy a house now? Good luck. You're going to pay 7.25% on a 30-year fixed. You'll be in the 6s on a 15. That's double from where it was back in March of this year. And grocery prices, as we mentioned earlier, food costs are up 13% year over year. Now, who gets blamed for this? Is predominantly the president and his policies. But this is one area where they don't have that much control. Sure, they have terrible energy policies, and energy goes into everything. But there's a lot of supply chain issues. There is the war. There's a lot of factors that go into rising food prices. But the most significant is these horrific oil policies. And oil goes into transportation, containers, plastics, you name it. Now think about this. You know, I remember Ronald Reagan asked the question, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? All you have to ask yourself, is your life better now than it was 2 years ago when Joe Biden was elected president? The vast majority of Americans say no. Think about this, folks. Democrats have spent $2 trillion on the economy on bills that Biden passed, or excuse me, the Senate and House passed, under Democrat control and Biden signed. How's that worked out? It hasn't. It's failed. And you know what? You ever notice they go out on the campaign trail, or if you're in a state where you happen to see campaign ads, they don't discuss the economy while on the campaign trail. Well, of course not. They don't want to talk about that. All they want to do is talk about abortion. Oh, I got news for you, folks. Hardcore leftist Democrats, yeah, that may be important to them. But to the most Americans, the economy, prices, stuff, gasoline, which is going up. You know, you go by a gas pump every day, you see the prices. You see and feel the pain. You go to the grocery store and shop, prices are way up, not just a little, a lot. And then, all right, let's get into some other things. These open border policies, open door policies at the border. You know where 76% of the migrants in this country are living? Homeless shelters. And good for DeSantis. He's continuing to ship illegals up to northern cities. Good for him. Greg Abbott's continuing to put them on buses. Let these sanctuary cities absorb them. You know, when they didn't have to, they were bragging about it to their voters. Hey, we're a sanctuary city. We're a sanctuary state. They're complaining about, oh, now it's a crisis. Well, if it's a crisis there, what is it along the Texas and Arizona border, specifically in Texas? That's typical, folks. These radical liberals that run these deep blue Democratic cities, always looking for somebody else to blame. You know what? It's their own policies. When they became a sanctuary city, now all of a sudden the illegal immigrants and the migrants are floating, going to those cities. They don't like it as much. Now let's get into another favorite Democratic thing here. You know, there's a perception out there Democrats are more for the criminals than they are the victims. You know, folks, most of the time in politics, if it's perception, it's reality. I've never figured out why Democrats are so enhanced with helping the criminals versus the victims. It bewilders me. No bail laws. Radical district attorneys that don't punish criminals, and it hurts the victims. In San Francisco, those woke policies have turned the city basically into an open drug market. People defecate on the streets. LA, there's 42,000 homeless people in LA. Heck, Rick Caruso, one of the guys running for mayor down here, runs television commercials talking about how there's 42,000 homeless and he's going to try to do a state of emergency to clean it up. I hope Caruso defeats Karen Bass, but, he goes out there and says, well, I used to be a Republican. Now the Republican Party left me. I changed my values. Baloney. There's no way a Republican could ever get elected in L.A. Too many radical liberals up there. But homelessness is a big problem in L.A. And between the homelessness in L.A. and the drug problems in San Francisco, two biggest cities in California are disasters. That serial killer in Stockton, which is right off the I-5 freeway, or 99 if you're going up the middle of the state near Lodi, they had a serial killer terrorizing Stockton, California. 5 people had been killed. He was out on a hunt to kill a 6th person when he was caught. Thank goodness the Stockton police caught this guy. He was raining terror on the city of Stockton. And in our traditional Monday morning report, unfortunately, 36 people shot in Chicago over the weekend, many innocent victims killed. God, it's just, you read the crime report in Chicago every Monday, it's the same thing. Unbelievable up there. But as much as all these crime numbers, you see them, it just bothers you. We did get some really good news over the weekend. An Orlando jewelry store owner had 4 punks come in with guns and try to rob him, and he killed 2 of them. Now, that was excellent. Too bad he didn't go 4 for 4. 2 of them got away. Now, they'll likely get apprehended. One robber died in the store. The other died after being shot by the gun store's owner. He died when he was trying to escape. That's not too bad, pal. You go in and rob a jewelry store. You think those 2 that lost their lives, if they thought about it, would do it again? Probably not. I only wish the store owner went 4 for 4. Then it would be like hitting for the cycle in baseball. And that would have been great. Now I know that's going to outrage all the liberals. Oh, how can you be so senseless? You know what? We side with the people who are the crime victims, not the criminals. All this guy did is save a lot of money for our judicial system by not having to put these criminals spend all kind of taxpayer money on a bunch of murderers. At least he knocked off 2 of them. Good for him. Now, internationally, wow, just heating up continuously in Ukraine. And Russia's continuing bombardment. They're using suicide drones now, cruise missile strikes in key Ukrainian cities. You say, what's a suicide drone? Well, a lot of drones, they drop their ammunition and they're able to bring them back, not these. They're pretty much what they say they are. They drop their ordnance and they explode. Folks, the Ukrainians continue taking back territory. The Russian conscripts who are being, oh God, it's just, you see pictures of them. And it's terrible. These kids didn't have a damn thing to do with this Russian policy. They weren't in the army. They weren't nothing. They were just living their lives. But they get conscripted into Putin's army, some of them with very little training at all. It's gotten so bad they emptied the prisons in Russia. They're shipping criminals to the front lines. And what the Russians do, if the criminals that they ship to the front lines try to flee, they kill them. And unfortunately, they're doing some of the same to that to the conscripts. You can't escape this stuff, folks. Emptying prisons, getting conscripts that aren't trained, and you take a picture, you look at a picture of these kids. It's horrific. You look at their picture and you know they're going to die because the Russian leadership could not care less. They don't care about their casualty totals. That's what you get when you get in a dictatorial regime like what's happening in Russia. So we'll go through the winter. The fighting will escalate. There'll be wins for the Russians, wins for the Ukrainians. But these conscript soldiers, people who had never volunteered to fight, are being basically drafted into the military and told you either fight or you die. Horrific situation there, and it's going to get worse. But the Ukrainians are holding their own. The weapons continue to flow in. through the United States, through NATO, through Great Britain. And they're basically having a standstill with the Russians, but they are taking back more territory. All right, so we teased a little bit at the top of the show. A lot of you who are football fans, what a festive weekend you had. Now, in one of the biggest shockers, University of Tennessee at Knoxville defeated Alabama 52-49. Great college football game. I had the pleasure of watching it. I got a question. At the end of that game, Nick Saban, who's arguably the greatest college football coach ever, some say, based on his national titles, the play calling was questionable. I mean, if Alabama ran the ball one or two times, they would have run the clock down to where there was no time for Tennessee to get back on the field. Alabama kicked a field goal at the end of the game and missed it. It was about a 50-yard kick, a makeable kick. But they hadn't run down enough time on the clock. So Tennessee got the ball back with a stellar Heisman Trophy candidate quarterback, threw two passes down the field. They lined up, kicked the field goal to win the game 52-49. First time Tennessee's beaten Alabama in 15 years. And now they're ranked in the top 5 in the country. I think they're number 3. So kudos to the Tennessee Volunteers knocking off Alabama. Some great college football games. USC over Utah. USC played Utah. Utah won by a point. Another great college football game. Boy, they're putting up a ton of points in college football. And then, of course, in pro football, big upsets. New York Jets over Green Bay. Nobody saw that coming. And the Pittsburgh Steelers, double-digit underdogs, defeat Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So a lot of great football, crazy games in the NFL. And for you football fans out there, you were in prime time. And how could we talk about sports without mentioning the San Diego Padres defeating the Los Angeles Dodgers, a baseball team, the LA Dodgers, that won 111 games. Folks, that is amazing. 111 games in baseball, all-time record wins. And yet, the San Diego Padres came in that series with fantastic pitching, great relief pitching, timely hitting. The Dodgers were up 3-0 in that game, and San Diego came back, knocked 5 on the board. And as a result, the LA Dodgers, for outside the COVID year when they won the World Series, going home again. That's like 10 out of the last 11 years where they've been in the playoffs and gone home early. So, congratulations to the San Diego Padres. And you had 2 other winners. The Philadelphia Phillies came out, won their series over the Braves, former World Series champ. So you got an interesting matchup here in the National League. You got the Padres and the Phillies. And then in the American League, the Houston Astros await the winner of the Indians Yankees. So that's a sports recap, folks. We got Breeders' Cup coming up in a few weeks. We're going to keep an eye on this politics stuff for you. Every day, these things can change, but we'll stay on top of it. So anyhow, that's a summary of the news today. Thanks, folks, for viewing. As always, we appreciate the comments and the feedback. We'll be back tomorrow. We've got some great guests lined up this week. You'll be impressed. So have a good evening. Keep going, Republicans. Keep focused on it. And we'll have a good election in November. Thanks a lot. See you tomorrow.